Good evening, everybody, and thank you to be here. Thanks for all the guests of honor for inviting me. I think the least said about BFSI, it's as less you can say, the more it is. I think I can't think of another industry which I'm happy to be a part of over the last 2 decades. I think when I think of banking and financial services, the first thought which really comes to my mind, and while we do all our investing, there are really 5 sectors which we think of. There's financial services, consumer, tech, healthcare, and to a certain extent industrials. And within all these 5 sectors, if you see, BFSI has a very, very large role to play. I think financial services, more ways than one, is core to all of us. And if you look at the remaining 4 sectors also, technology, industrials, healthcare, or consumer, in all of these 4, in some senses, all of us through BFSI are contributing in a big way. So with that, I want to kind of start off by saying, BFSI is like a raw material to all these businesses, but the raw material in itself is changing on a day-to-day basis. If you just go back for the last 10, 20 years and look at the traditional business models, and you look at banks, and you look at a large number of companies, we were largely predicated on 2 forms of BFSI, which became really important. One was, most importantly, capital, and second was obviously products. And both of these were very, very critical in growth for all of these 5 things across the last 2 decades. I think for the last 3 to 5 years, and especially I think that's where technology data comes in, I think the business models are changing. It's not only going to be about capital and products, it's largely going to come down to a lot of execution, a lot of service, and most importantly, the consumer is going to become more and more demanding, not necessarily to adopt technology, adopt artificial intelligence on an immediate basis, but his expectation from the people he meets, from the people he wants to take advice from, is going to be one which is largely going to be dependent and driven basis technology as well as data. Firms like us obviously need to sharpen ourselves on a day-to-day basis. We have to develop the right intranet tools, right platforms, where we are able to capture millions of data points to be able to ensure that we don't make basic mistakes with our clients. And expectations of clients also for our ability to be able to capture data is increasing on a day-to-day basis. And some of these things can't really be replaced by products and capital. You can provide capital, but it really boils down to execution and also a lot to data. And for data, obviously, you have to have the right tools. You have to put in the right amount of resources. But most importantly, you have to have the right confluence of being able to marry the right set of people in the organization who understand the domain knowledge, as well as the right set of maybe tools which are available to kind of put it all together. And I think in that sphere, we are at a very, very nascent stage. And I think if I was to look back at examples within BFSI, you got examples like Sybil, if you go back in time over the last 10, 15, 20 years, of organizations which were able to not only capture data, obviously spurred by the regulator in the right spirit, capture the data, but also make the data very interpretable, give it a score which could be measurable, and most importantly, actionable. And I think if you look at the other BFSI sector, especially when you're looking at let's say some of the newer businesses, asset management, wealth management, financial services, even insurance maybe a little bit more towards the lending side, which is a little discovered. I think all of these are still in a stage where we are potentially still in a stage where we are capturing a lot of this data. And I think the good news is, just with the innovations over the last 3-5 years, our ability to capture this data, thanks to CAMs, fintech, a lot of mutual funds which have done a phenomenal amount of work in terms of capturing data. Today, a lot of the data is available. We are able to capture it. How are we actually really able to capture this data? How do we kind of measure it, interpret it, and then make it actionable? Will go a long way in helping the other sectors on the BFSI side to grow. The good news is, obviously, all of us are kind of kosher to that thought process. All of us are working towards it. And I think, even if I look at firms like Protean, where Mr. Hari Bhakti is a part of, or a lot of other new fintech firms, the ability to capture all of this data and convert it and make it actionable quickly is really something which is going to be very, very critical to the growth. The other thing which I would kind of want to talk about, obviously, is we've got other platforms within BFSI. You've got exchanges, you've got intermediaries, and I think if I just look at these set of intermediaries globally, today across all their business models, if you look at exchanges across the entire globe, Today, 50 to 60% of revenues for exchanges would come from data. So data is something which is going to be very, very important. It's practically going to become the new raw material as compared to capital in some ways. One thing obviously is not going to change. People and execution will continue to be important, whether that was capital or it was data. But I think going forward, the one biggest differentiator is really going to be data in more ways than one. Otherwise, I think generally speaking, BFSI as a sector will continue to grow. There are new businesses like wealth and asset management, which I am fortunate to be a part of. And I think over the next 2 decades, we can all be kind of 100% sure. And I can see Navneet here, and I met him not too long back. I met him like 3 or 4 weeks back, and I was just shocked with one data point. I think the entire equity mutual fund industry in India has grown from maybe 4 lakh crores or 14 lakh crores to 34 lakh crores, something like that. It's kind of grown 3.5, 4x over the last 10 years. And a large part of that's happened, not because of us, we are only agents of change, but the way the entire country has grown. I think over the next 20 years, we're going to have the same thing. Events will keep happening. There will be lots of shocks, but honestly, I think the entire BFSI sector is going to continue to grow. And I think we'll just have to get our own action points right. Capital will be important, people will be important, but most importantly, our own ability to capture the right amount of data and give it in the hands of the consumer to be able to make the right decision will be the one barometer which will allow us to scale very fast. And eventually this industry will scale, and it's only the tip of the iceberg, and hopefully over the next 2 decades, all of us, including the entire sector, and I'm sure each individual here, will be much larger, bigger, and bolder. Thank you.